The important people are here.
Well, they are. And so welcome back everybody, to Aligning with Success on March 13. No, wait, March 12.
Well,
March 12.
have another day.
On the brain because I've got the Hispanic event tomorrow. I was just on a pre-call on that one. Okay, so let me sort of encapsulate what I think the last couple of meetings have been about, if we're looking at this in terms of order of progression. It was to identify the difference between a partner and a consultant, to look at the process involved in that identification, and to look at the kind of objections that would be coming up if there was some shortcomings on our delivery of the information and what it is that we're expecting. So I have this kind of encapsulated in a page that you guys would be familiar with, which is this one here, one of our tools in our toolbox. Let me see, I got my toolbox right here. And hopefully I have my tool handy dandy. Here we go. Okay, so on the flip side of the why is the how, this presentation of the process. So let me just quickly run through this because this is what we've covered over the last couple of days. I hope you can see this. I didn't get a chance to fix up the fonts on this to be a little bit more clear, but let me
we can see it.
Okay, good. Let me just switch this video panel to here. Okay, good. Essentially what we have is a process by which we take somebody who is not aware of Nikan whatsoever from our contact list. And again, it's an emphasis on the contact list. They came from somewhere, and then we present them with information that moves them to a point where they know enough, where they're 100% informed, to be able to make a committed decision. A partner being distinguished by somebody who's investing their time, money, and contacts. And we went over why they might not, because there might be some shortcoming in the process. But the goal of the time, money, and contacts has to be referenced. There needs to be a reference to the idea of a 90-day launch. There's a reason why their time, their money, and contacts is going into this, because we're going to create something, and you need something to create something. So the process begins with the why conversation, then follows up with the how conversation and what conversation. Now, I get questions about this. Is this something that you do in one sitting? Is this in multiple sittings? There's no real clean and cut dry answer to that, because it depends on the individual you're working with, how much time you have with them. Have you set this appointment up to meet with them? Is it an in-home? What's the context? If you're doing what I'm doing, you're trying to get it done as in short a time as possible, but it usually takes more than one meeting to get all this across. If you're in launch mode, which we'll discuss next, then it's almost impossible to do this in one sitting. You want to actually create some group activities where you're covering one or more of these pieces in a group setting. We'll come back to that. If you're not muted, I am picking this up, so I'm not sure if the camera's switching back and forth to you. But so the first step is obviously to turn a contact into an interested contact. Interested in what? Interested in having a conversation. Not interested in Nikan. They don't know anything about Nikan thus far. And that should be the correct approach, where a why establishes the motivation for them to want to have a conversation with you, because you've identified in one of those 5 pillars something that may be of interest or importance to them. Next we go, the how conversation. That converts the interest into a result of some kind. Now, the result is either a customer or a consultant. I don't even know that the two are different, but essentially somebody who's prepared to be at least a customer and maybe a consultant. At least a customer and maybe a consultant. And then the last conversation really clarifies what it takes to go from being somebody who's just looking at this as a hobby or as a maybe or as a wannabe, to somebody who really invests the time, money, and contacts to create a launch, whereby at the conclusion of that launch, they have a legitimate business, or at least the beginning of a business. So that's the process. And the first step is to create interest. The second one to build belief. And the third one is to activate. So again, I'm just giving you packages so you can wrap your mind around the flow, so that we understand that this is a flow of somebody's understanding, their mindset. To go from 0 informed to 100% informed, where a decision comes in, we have to activate their imagination. We have to involve their belief system. We have to move them from simply someone who knows nothing to somebody who's prepared to actually take action. And then finally, the Lockin Event, which our next Lockin Event is Saturday, this coming Saturday. Thank you to all of you who've already got your launch calendars, or excuse me, your flyers prepared. We have a special guest on this one coming up Saturday you're going to enjoy. The purpose of the Lockin Event is to resolve in the mind of somebody who is yet unresolved as to whether or not they want to take a look at this and move forward as a business, to launch their business in a way that's calculated, in a way that's meaningful and purposeful, with an action plan. So that Lockin Event really helps shift the focus away from the idea of getting involved in NECAN to really getting busy in NECAN. What does that look like? What does it look like if I was really busy in NECAN, meaning productive, functional, and versus somebody who's just in NECAN? The distinction between doing NECAN and building a NECAN business. This is what's created in that last step, and that lock-in helps to cement that. So it's important in a lock-in event to include information that helps that person see the business perspective. And in the last lock-in event we did, and the one that we encourage you guys to do, you want to reinforce the points that have been made already. You want to validate the points that have been made in the why, how, and what conversations, especially the part about launching the business. And the best way to validate any of that information, of course, is through testimonials. So you want to line up those testimonials so that they're not just product-centric. That will answer the question as to why they should be a customer. But you've got to, in the Lock-in Event, answer the questions to why they should launch their business versus tiptoe through the tulips. This is really important. And so let's now move the clock forward to what now? Say I have somebody who really wants to move forward on this and make something of it. What do we do with this person? Well, this is where a launch plan comes in. What exactly do we mean by a launch plan? Well, like baking a cake, there's a process to baking a cake. And if you're baking a small cake, the process is still the process. Or if you're baking a large cake, the process is still the process. What's different is the strategy. How much of the ingredients do you need? The ratio of the ingredients doesn't change. It's just how much of the ingredients do you need? And do you have the tray large enough? And can you fit this in the oven that you're using, or et cetera? So the strategy is the only thing that changes based on the expected outcome. The process doesn't change. What it takes to create a partner is what it takes to create a partner. I don't think you can escape this process that we're showing you in front here, these 3 conversations that invariably have to happen in order for somebody to resolve in their mind why they should invest the time, money, and contacts. And if we went over the last week's presentation where we went into the objections of time, money, and contacts, it really becomes clear why somebody might have an objection. What did we miss in these steps? What information or what value was omitted when we were delivering this content? Because you really need to demonstrate the value of their time, the value of their investment financially in the products, and the value of their contact list, and the return. What would be the return of their time, money, and contacts if they're going to make such an investment? And so, again, the real emphasis in the Lock-in Event is the ROI. What's the return on investment? This is what really needs to be validated. What's the return on investment of time, of money, of contacts? That's what helps somebody make the decision. And of course, the more emotional that information is via the testimonies, because we tend to make decisions based on emotions, not based on logic. We've presented logic, but the last piece, the piece that's really going to be the lever, is the emotion. So your lock-in event, wherever you're hosting one, whenever you're having one, be sure that you have, it's rich in the emotion of Nikken, in the why, the how, and the what. Okay, so this 90-day launch, what would it look like if we proposed a 90-day launch? What is the objective? What is the outcome? Well, let's break that 90-day into 3 30 days. Since our business is monthly, our compensation plan is monthly, our rank advancements are, generally speaking, based on the volume of the month, whether it's each month of the 3 months or one singular month once you go beyond silver. The idea is we need a 30-day strategy, but a 90-day launch would be a 30-day strategy duplicated. So the recipe for baking the cake is the process that you see here. The strategy is, what size of cake are we going to bake in 30 days so that we can teach the partners that join us how to do the same thing in the next 30 days. So the goal, the outcome of a 90-day launch is to, number one, find our team. And then number two, launch our team. Again, find the team, then launch the team. That is the goal. Now, the third aspect of the goal, the third phase, and generally speaking by the 90th, in that 90th or the third month, is the momentum phase. If this launch has been done well, then your newbie ought to have some momentum. Momentum means there's stuff happening that they are not necessarily making happen. It's happening because they have a team of people who have just as much interest and are doing things independently and collaboratively. But the goal here is to, number one, find a team, number two, launch the team, and then number three, just keep fanning the flames of that activity so that that team starts to have its own sense of self and has a sense of team as well. That's an important part of establishing a team, is that the team actually feels like one. Like right now, I'm establishing a team in Canada. We just created a WhatsApp chat called Team Nikken Canada with a nice Canadian flag as the photo for the WhatsApp chat. And this will include people who are right now looking to be partners and wanting to launch the business and be part of the activity that's coming around and being planned for this year in the Canadian market. And of course, because a lot of the emphasis has been on the Hispanic market, right now the lead off people in that team are primarily people who have a Spanish-speaking background. So creating a team is the goal of that 90-day launch, and then putting that team into momentum, which means a sense of group and unit identity. Can anyone identify where that sound's coming from? We got like a piano or piano lessons going on in the background. I can't see it here. Okay, let's carry on then. So if 3 people are what we're looking to find, our teammates, in the first 30 days, that means there's got to be a certain number of people going into this process, resulting in that last group of people being identified. And again, that's an important word. They identify themselves. Your leaders identify themselves. And we went through this in the last 2 sessions. How would one identify themselves as a leader? Because they're starting to do the things that we've shown them is expected of them if they were going to activate as a partner. They would be investing their time, which means they would be contacting you, and they would be setting up appointments to meet with you and to meet with new people. They would have invested their money in their products to get their Nikken Wellness Home started and their business started. And I think those two are not necessarily the same question. Getting your unique and wellness home started means you looking at this as a consumer, but getting your business started may include some items that are useful and valuable for demonstration purposes, especially. Then, of course, there's your contact list. And if we've already gone into this last week, so I don't want to repeat myself, but if somebody's holding back on that contact list, they're not really spending the time that they need to even generate a contact list, well, they're not investing. And so we haven't completed the process, let's just say, where they're concerned. They're not yet ready to be on the starting blocks of a partner. So let's just assume that they're not. Then we need to look back and say, okay, what is missing here? And that might require you just asking some bullet questions like, okay, what's the problem? There's been some hesitation on you creating that contact list. I'd like to understand why, or where you at in this. And so that'll help you and them get back on this path of moving them. And then you can sort of identify, are they really at the partner stage, or was there a Lockin event that they haven't been to, or they need exposure to? Did they understand what it takes to succeed? Did you go through that compensation plan, maybe the recipe of our incentives, et cetera? So these are things that this gives you a schematic to help you become a pro. A pro is always aware of where somebody's at and where they need to go next. Also, by the way, your lever in any one of these stages to move somebody to the next step is, anybody, any guesses? What's the most powerful tool that you have to move somebody from one step to the next? This one should be an easy one. Madeline.
The ABC.
Yes, ma'am. It's the ABC, of course. Let's see, the chat message says three-way. Yep, three-way or ABC. Essentially same thing, right? So clearly, leverage is what helps people move forward. Don't be shy about that. Don't be hesitant about that. It's one of the reasons why we ask you to collaborate and meet other people so that you'll have a nice broad list of A's. You just don't know which A is going to be the best one, so I try to match the person with the best A. So if we're going to find three partners, if three partners are going to identify themselves to us within a month's time, something has had to have happened. Well, what has to have happened is more than three people were introduced to this. So if we go through this process, we know this thing called the rule of thirds is a rule that we just cannot avoid. If three people have identified themselves as partners, then 9 most likely, and I'm telling you, this is a fact. If you're not running these numbers, then you are deluding yourself. Everybody wants to think the 3 people they have are the 3 partners. If they're not investing their time, money, and contacts, they're not. They're somewhere in between. And 9 people who are somewhere in between will result in 3 people who are not in between, who've made a decision if you follow up with that last step, the activation and lock-in. So I want to see 9 people on paper. If I'm looking at a genealogy report and I don't see 9 new names on it, it's not finished, this launch strategy. So be extremely objective when it comes to putting numbers on the scoreboard. Don't delude yourself. If you have more than 3 because you've put 9 on the scoreboard, yay. But if you haven't put 9 on the scoreboard, you don't have 3. Don't delude yourself. So now, how do I get 9 people to at least register? Which, by the way, if 9 people have signed up, that means I have at least 9 customers for sure. I'll probably have more because not everybody who joins as a consultant or not everybody who's a customer joins as a consultant. So if I've got 9 consultants, I've got more customers. Pretty good chance I've got 9 or 10 customers as well. So if you look at it from this standpoint, this exercise will have resulted in somebody advancing in rank. If you've got 9 customers and 9 signups, you got somebody who's advanced in rank probably to the silver rank already. So silver as a rank advancement, or for that matter, some of these early incentives in the incentive program will actually happen as a consequence of this plan. So this plan is really the only plan I ever teach. because I know that this plan will result in the most important thing, a team. Because that's what it's going to take to become a Royal Diamond in ECAN, a team. And if you look to all those who are presenting themselves and are being recognized online and so forth, you'll find they're constantly surrounded by their team. So they're never alone. It's never, no one achieves Diamond or Royal Diamond by themselves. So the goal here in this exercise is to find a team. That's the motivation, not to rank advance. That's the consequence. And so if we keep that straight and we help that new person understand that, then they'll keep their eye on the prize, which is let's find our team. So if we're going to have 9, working back the rule of thirds, guess what? We've probably had to interest a lot more people. So that means 3 times 9, 27. So if we've engaged 27 people in the how step, in other words, they've been presented the entirety of the NECAN opportunity and products. 27 people, in however way you were able to make that happen, one-on-one if need be, or in small groups, or repeatedly over 3 or 4 different meetings, whatever it takes. The numbers are the numbers. I can assure you that will result in a success every time. So if 27 people have been presented the idea, 9 will resolve as customers, 9 will resolve as consultants, and out of those 9 in that last final step, 3 will start to identify themselves. So again, working backwards, for me to find 27 people with my new partner in the first month, in fact, even before the first month, because remember, we want to get through this process. And so I need to do this within 2 to 3 weeks with my newbie. Get at least 27 people who want to agree to meet with us and hear the story. How many phone calls is that going to take? And again, now we're starting to understand where the daily activity comes in. If people aren't making phone calls every day to reach out to new contacts, we're not going to have new contacts to present to. And generally speaking, if that rule of third works itself out, then we need to have a contact list of somewhere between 80 and 100 names. Again, now this follows back to why is it important to invest your contact list? Because without a complete contact list, we're going to have an incomplete recipe for us to bake the cake. And so we might end up with unleavened bread instead of a nice, sweet, juicy cake. So we need the numbers to make this work. And hence, be clear about that with somebody that that is informing you that they want to be a partner by their actions. One of the things we talked about last week was, how do I get somebody over that hurdle if they're just simply not making the full investment? We talked about, well, how about you taproot? How about you find one person? If you can help them sponsor at least one consultant or generate at least one customer, you're validating for them that even they can find a customer or a consultant, that it can happen for them. If you just had the one, then it naturally flows from there that they can have more than one. And if we understand this rule here, then if we have 9 consultants, we're going to find our 3 partners. So it just validates the point. If you're having trouble getting somebody to the starting blocks, then that's how you do it. Taproot. Find at least one person as a customer and or consultant or both. Now, our contact list then will become very, very important to them. It'll go from low priority to very high priority because now they know it does resolve with a result. This process does end up creating a result. And therefore, now we just need to get good at this process and produce more results. You don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. We just got to get good at what we know. So this is our process. This is our strategy. And the activities, therefore, in terms of the rhythm of the business, words that people are going to hear more and more often, is that creating interest, those contacts to create that engagement. By the way, just an FYI, if you follow the contact and invite script that we refer to and that I refer to in the tools box on the YouTube, the March 27 YouTube of last year, or the just the audio that Dave Johnson recently put out, which is an audio of a talk called Contact and Invite that you can also find on YouTube with myself, Elsa Boynton, Susan Carver. You'll find that if you do in fact apply that, let's call it a script for lack of a better word, that script in making those initial calls to your contact list, your numbers will actually improve. What I'm showing you is a worst case scenario. 1/3 of the people contacted are interested in hearing more. If you follow that script and that training, your numbers will actually be better. And so that's another key indicator, to me, in fact, that a person is following the script or not following the script based on that initial call. Do the calls result in a meeting? If they're not resulting in the meeting, I know they're not following the script. Or they haven't pre-qualified their list. Or they haven't pre-qualified their list correctly. So we might need a little bit of coaching on what is an entrepreneur? What do we mean by influence? What do we mean by resources? So keep that in mind. So daily contact will result in people saying, tell me more. Now, telling them more, you want to get that done in a certain time frame. You don't want, let's say, 5 or 6 new people that you've contacted who want to meet with you to be put off until next week. So we want to see those people presented to within 48 hours of being contacted. So generally speaking, if you're contacting people every day, you're going to have meetings, more than one most likely, especially if you're in launch mode every week. You may have 2, 3, 4, or even 5. If you've got lunch hour, make that lunch hour an event so you can meet with somebody. If you have an in-home like I'm having Wednesday night, I expect that there will be a handful of people who have been contacted since the last one, which was last week, to be included in this week's event. So this week will be another event or gathering of people who are interested because they were contacted according to the script. They've demonstrated an interest. And so not an interest in Nikken. They don't know about Nikken yet. Just an interest in improving the quality of their life in one or more of these 5 pillars of health. Madeline, I see you unmuted. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question. So now you had an event last week and another one this week. So since we've switched the product showcase to more of an opportunity meeting, the business opportunity meeting, is that what you're doing at those in-homes since you've made the phone calls beforehand?
Yes. The purpose of the how presentation is threefold. I want to show them the products, the business, and the system. Those are the 3 things that have to be presented in order for somebody to have the full picture. Again, the products, the business, and the system. And in the order that I presented, it's the business, the products, and the system. And this is all wrapped in the vision. So I tend to, because of the nature of how I lead, I start with why this meeting is happening, which is based on vision. Then I move to the delivery of the presentation, and the delivery would then move into the business, the products, and the system, so that they understand the scope of how it's doable, how it's actually possible, how it's actually conceivable to have a life in balance because of what we offer. And by the way, notice I added system. Notice that's in there. The idea of business, products, and system. How many of you are actually showing people a system? Every time you pull out a card like this and you refer to it, you're showing them a system. So if you're not using the tools, you're not showing them a system. So be very calculated in how you deliver the information, because the how you actually deliver the information is the system. And so if they see there's a system you're following, it's something they can learn to duplicate. Very, very critical. So business, product, system, encapsulated in vision. That's the how presentation. That should happen at least once a week, if not more, especially if you're in launch mode. If you're going to see that many people in a short period of time, you may not be able to do this in one meeting. Dee, did you want to?
Only a comment that I'd love to see you do that with live people in the room and an in-home. I don't know if
it's just not, it's not practical for me to be technically involved in that, but
right. I get that.
yeah. But essentially consider the PowerPoint that we released, or the PDF that we released of the business meeting. That's the scope of the presentation, because that presentation goes from business to product. And so it covers the scope of it. And of course I do demos. I do the insole demo every time, because that's the one thing, that's the one seed that if they leave is going to fester. And that may turn that person into a customer down the road anyway. So that's an important part of why meeting with people is more important than doing just an online presentation. Those demos hit them on an emotional level that information just doesn't. And as far as what's the vision, well, in this particular case, the vision for me that I'm delivering is the launch of the Canadian market, particularly in the Hispanic market. And the fact that I'm leveraging the expertise and success of the Latino market to help influence that situation, culminating with a large event in October. So they're getting all of that in the opening sentences of the meeting, which preceding even me saying anything is establishing or reestablishing why we're even meeting. So the first thing that they will see is these cards in front of them. I have these cards on the table in front of every prospect. Each one gets one. And I ask them to take a look at that and to identify one or two of the areas that might be jumping out at them. So I sort of make sure that step is covered just in case it wasn't covered properly in the one-on-one or in the contact and invite. I want to start from the beginning, and the beginning is, why are we meeting? And if there's not a desire to improve that situation in their life, then the meeting is a waste of their time. I don't mind saying that, by the way.
Mike, are you leveraging bringing another A in for you? Especially like Tuesday? Not yet?
No, not in that first meeting. Right now, I'm the A in that meeting for that individual, so I don't need an A on top of me.
Your meeting Wednesday night, Mike, is that English speaking or is that Spanish people?
Well, it's been so far Spanish people, but it's English. I'm speaking English.
Okay.
So now the result, now let's say I did, instead of one meeting a week, I did 3. If we were on pace to do 3 meetings a week, that would require more contact and invite, right? In other words, if I said, okay, I got these next 3 days, what if I said I only have 3 days next week and then after that I don't? Then that means that the person I'm launching has to really leverage those 3 days. When does that happen? I'll tell you when that happens. When I fly out of town to launch somebody. That's why I prefer sponsoring people out of town. Because then they're forced to really put it on to utilize my time, because I can't be there for very long. So in the time that I'm there, I want to have at least 3 meetings where they've got 5 to 10 people in each one. So just work your strategy. Figure out what's the strategy that I have available in order to accommodate this new person I'm launching, and what's their strategy? What's their timetable? Are they willing to set that time aside for a proper launch, or are they dabbling? There's a difference between launching and dabbling. And the impact on the people who you're inviting is huge, huge. Let me give you a metaphor that I like to use. If I take a small bit of uranium and I put it in a nuclear reactor called a fission reactor, and I put rods inside that reactor to prevent the uranium from mixing with other uranium, in other words, I control the reaction, it won't go critical. It means it won't explode, but it will burn. It will create a nice steady flow of heat, which we then convert into steam and turn our turbines. But if I were to remove those rods all at once and expose the uranium entirely, it will go exponential, its fission reaction, and cause a nuclear meltdown and an explosion of epic proportions. So it's not the amount of uranium, it's whether it's being controlled. whether it's being a slow release, a slow burn. The difference is enormous in the output in terms of immediacy. And so if I'm looking to create a team now and I go into slow burn mode, you can see I'm just accentuating the time it takes to create any momentum at all. And in fact, you probably won't create any momentum at all because there's no momentum in a steady, slow burn. You want to create an explosion. That's momentum. So I don't want a controlled reaction. I want an uncontrolled reaction. I want lots of exposure in a short period of time. And so the more I can compress that how step, the faster I'm going to find my customers and my consultants, which puts the emphasis then on the contact and invite, which it should be. There must be an emphasis there to keep the reaction going in a fast way. So all the emphasis falls on my new contact to do their job, which is contact and invite, which they're only going to do if they've invested their time, their money, and their contacts. And by the way, the less they do, the more they tiptoe into the investment portion of this, the less likely you're going to get an uncontrolled burn, a chain reaction. So that's another footnote for you guys is, are you really willing to put it on the line and say, guys, our experience tells us that if you're not fully committed, you're not going to do what it takes to get the kind of reaction we're looking to create in terms of finding your team and building momentum. So I just need to tell you that because I want to give you the best start possible. So let's see, that's the weekly. Now, before this month is over, we need to have this concluded, this entire process where any one of these people who came into the process this month are concerned. We want to wrap up the month. And so we have something, especially a lock-in event, designed to help wrap up the month, help identify who's really in, so that we can then focus where those people are concerned in helping them to make that time, money, and contact investment so that when month 2 rolls around, we know who we're running with. The emphasis, the focus then turns to them and their in-homes. So now month 2 is simply working with partners that emerged out of month 1. So that's why this is a plan. This is what, there's dates involved, so there must be a calendar involved. So unless your launch calendar exists, it's not really a launch plan. It's just a process. But most people, they know that if they're going to bake a cake, you got to preset the oven at a certain temperature, you got to put it in for a certain amount of time, and you got to take it out before it burns on you. So you don't turn the temperature down to a slower heat and say, okay, we'll just give it a little bit more time. It's not going to do what it needs to do.
We've had a lot of practice at that, Mike. We already know that.
Okay. So there we go. Let me wrap up then with this part. So the presentations that are involved in these 3, delivery of this content is obviously this card for the first step. That icon that you see there, sleep, air, water, nutrition, light, and the money, that's our business presentation. And then the last piece there, what we see as 3 partners and 2 customers, our new model for this is the core circle of influence that you see in that business presentation. The idea of taking that core circle of influence and replicating it. So the tool that helps to make all this happen and sort of encapsulates it all is this tool here. It's the most important tool in your arsenal of tools as a training tool, as a teaching tool, as a launch tool, as a prep tool, as an ongoing strategy tool, because you can use it and fill it in. And I encourage you to do that. So this one tool sort of is the business in a nutshell. And I think it's super, super, super critical that you use it like toilet paper. I mean, it's got to be in circulation. It's got to be out there, and everybody's got to have their hands on one. So that, and don't be afraid to get them dirty. There's more, you can buy more. But the goal is to leverage it in a big way. Okay. Any questions? Wow, silence. So go ahead, fire away.
I want to say these last few weeks have just been so eye-opening to me. I mean, this stuff finally makes sense to me. I mean, I'm sorry. I know that these tools have been out there for what, a year, 2 years, I don't know. I mean, I keep buying them, but they make sense to me now. So I just want to say thank you.
You're very welcome. You know, it's funny because it reminds me of something I used to say. You know, an electrician with the tool pouch is useless if they don't know the tools, how to use the tools in their tool pouch. So yeah, it's important to understand how these things fit together to give you a system and how important it is to use them.
And you know, the thing that helps the most is your analogies, you know, like planning a wedding, like baking a cake, like, you know, because it just, and maybe I'm just ready, you know, to hear this. I mean, we've wasted, I don't want to say wasted time, okay, but, you know, spinning our tires and working with people that really are not ready, you know, and the biggest clue was you can't even get a names list. You know, even when you offer to sit down and help them think of people, you know, so, and, you know, it's like just, you know, the writing's on the wall, just state the facts. This is how it is. And, you know, even the verbiage that you use to say these things nicely to people, you know, you're speaking the truth, you're telling it like it is, and, you know, yet you're not putting anybody down or, you know, anything. But, I mean, it's probably been like the last 3 weeks that this has just really so come together for me. So,
well, fantastic. Thank
yeah.
you. If you think then that these three presentations are something of a grouping that, you know, you might use for getting somebody up to speed on this, just keep in mind, you're hearing it now from the point of view that you're hearing it. Somebody brand spanking new may not get it for a while. Doesn't mean they shouldn't have access, but definitely you should utilize this or review this yourself just so that you can hone your skill. At the end of the day, the goal is for us to become really good at this. This being what? Finding people, as Dennis and Ruth would say, find them and wind them up, right? And see who goes. So we do need some form of a system in order for this to be duplicatable. And the thing that is key to duplication is not personality, can't be personality driven. It has to be systems driven. It's the only thing we can duplicate. So to have a clearly defined system, even though it may be a few simple tools, it still becomes a system when you know this tool does something specifically to move this process along for someone.
I'll show you a kitchen example. This is the pasta baking pans. Can you see them? We're going to be making 1,200 loaves of bread over the
next. You got a good strategy if you're doing that.
We have a strategy. We have a system. We have a team. We have too many bosses. Yes.
You know, for some reason, Mike, using the term system is making more sense than process. And
well, there's two. Why. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, but they're not the same.
Okay.
It's not a metaphor for the other. The system is a repeatable thing that someone can learn and apply so that they produce a result that's consistent. That's a system.
Okay.
The process is a component of what it is they need to learn. And strategy is the other component. Process and strategy are not the same. Process is what do I need to do to cook a noodle. Strategy is how many noodles do I got to cook to feed a family of 5 at 6 o'clock tonight. That's strategy. So the process is the process for cooking the noodle, but strategy is a little bit more complex because you got to cook a bunch of noodles at the same time to serve it in such a way that it's palatable.
Okay.
And process is to learn system is what are the tools and the processes to be able to do this with some predictability.
Okay. Thank you.
I knew this aerospace engineering degree would come in handy one day. I just knew it. Any other thoughts? Or actually, no, we're at 9:45, so I like to wrap up in 45 minutes. I keep saying that out loud, but this is probably maybe the first time we actually hit the mark. So with that in mind, then I'm going to just say, let's wrap this up, put this one in the oven, and share with your friends. So thanks everybody for joining us tonight. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Mikey.